having that healthy dose of fear is just pretty common and normal, right? We're talking where it goes beyond that and it debilitates you from doing the thing that you want to do, right? So what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying, I'm acknowledging I have that, I'm not giving into it because I'm so passionate and dedicated to my legacy, I'm going to push through and do what needs to be done.
Yes, I think that's right, that I don't have, fear is no longer holding me back from doing what I need to do.
You have developed a self-awareness of who you are and where you want to go. But now what? Sound familiar? In my 20 years of practice as a Superior Court Mediator, clinician, executive coach, and parent, I've noticed one thing above all. No meaningful transformation can happen unless you find and apply the tools and skills that are right for you. See, the thing is, without tools, without a recipe, you might as well flip a coin and hope it works. Or you'll get burnt out listening to bad advice and following tips that just aren't useful in your situation. I have been there and I've seen thousands of clients right there as well. My name is Deepa and Recipes for Life is my show where you and I learn the ingredients of high-performing, well-adjusted humans and how they get through their own life, all to craft a recipe for life of our own. Today's guest is Raghni Naidu. I want to share these words with you: fear and perseverance. After the episode, come back to these words and reflect on them. Raghni is the first female Indian immigrant to have founded and owned a wine brand in the United States. She successfully launched Naidu Wines during the pandemic in 2020, and in this short span, her wines have won acclaim at prestigious competitions. Her label is on the wine list at multiple Michelin-starred restaurants, and Raghni has been featured in publications like Forbes and Food Network. She received her Bachelor of Business in Marketing from RMIT in Melbourne, Australia, and has a passion for producing exceptional wine and curating memorable wine country experiences for others. By the end of today's conversation, you'll have new ingredients for trusting your own palate, listening to your instinct, ways to move from self-doubt to self-confidence, and finally, reframing your relationship with fear. You'll also hear about her journey of launching a business just before the pandemic, learning to hold and dig deep during the intense fire season, and relying on her newly growing knowledge to make decisions that would prove to have a 50-50 chance of success, and much more. Before we jump into the episode, I have one ask. Teach what you've learned to someone you care about within 48 hours. Research shows that it'll help you internalize the tools beyond just listening to them. Here's Raghni from Naidu Wines. I was really, really curious because, you're into this whole winemaking industry and business. I was like, before Naidu Wines, what kind of wines did you like? Like, what was your go-to wine?
So my go-to wine from the very beginning has always been, and I think always will be, Pinot Noir. So it was, when I bought the vineyard, it was even more kind of serendipitous that it happened to be a Pinot Noir vineyard. And so Pinot Noir has kind of been the varietal that got me into wine. And back in Australia, probably didn't have the best of wine in college. And I was like, I don't know, about wine. But of course, when we moved here to the United States and we moved to the Bay Area, Sonoma and Napa were right here, and we got to try some pretty special wines here. I really, our friends and I, we would focus on, in Sebastopol, actually, we would do weekends away and explore, Pinot Noir wineries. And that has always been, that varietal has always been very special to me. Even when I would go out to restaurants, I would always be like, okay, let's try something else, because I was always very curious and I wanted to try different varietals. But I unfortunately was one of those people who had to send that wine back and get my Pinot Noir. So that's it was really, really funny when that happened, that the vineyard I came across happened to be Pinot Noir. And I think that really had a big sort of weight on the decision of going forward. So I thought, it was meant to be. And truly it was meant to be. And so there's been no looking back. And
Yeah.
so
Well, like you said, meant to be. But so can I call you a Pinot Noir snob?
I don't like to be called a Pinot Noir snob. I don't like, personally, I'm not a
How
big fan
about
of snobs.
all right, so but tell me something. We won't call you that then. But tell me something. Of course, before Naidu, what brand of Pinot Noir would you recommend is like the really good one with like proper spicy Indian food?
Well, first of all, I think wine can be paired with all sorts of different cuisine, right? Right now, that conversation I feel like is just starting. It's been so nice to have Naidu Wines in wonderful Indian restaurants, and people can actually see that pairing in action, which is wonderful. But other than that, I think we are so bound by the narrative that's out there, which is generally, wine comes from France, Italy, and it's a part of their lifestyle and their tradition in such a deep way there that's where the conversation began. And so that has, of course, moved across the globe as that setting. If you go to you go to an Italian restaurant in Australia, you'll have a nice Sangiovese or a Chianti, or you go to another part of the world, and you'll go to England and it'll be a Bordeaux. I don't like to personally put wines in pairing categories. I really believe in trusting your own palate and going with what you think works really well. So before Naidu Wines, as I mentioned, I explored Sebastopol, and Mary Edwards Winery is a really special place because Mary Edwards actually was one of the I think she was the first female winemaker to graduate out of UC Davis, and like she actually got into the business herself. And after so I'd been there before and knew that they made really special wines. But when I bought the vineyard, I happened to go with my girlfriends for a weekend there to show them our winery. And we went to Mary Edwards, and I learned a little bit more, from a different perspective about her story, how she was one of the first and, woman. And I just felt like, okay, like she did this many years ago. This community is open to this, is open to women doing this and clearly excelling in it. So I feel like Mary Edwards and they have, wonderful Pinot Noirs from various different vineyards. And I would say, pair the wine with whatever you think, whatever fancies you. But in terms of a Pinot Noir, I think it's such a versatile wine. You can have it with friends, just sipping at the bar or having a chat. And you can pair it with a really beautiful, elegant meal. And I have now found that you can pair it with some pretty amazing Indian food. Like my favorite is biryani and Pinot Noir. And or like a lamb dish or something with a little bit of spice. Because I think the fruit in the Pinot and the kind of earthy spice in some of our food can balance off pretty well. And you can also pair Pinot with scallops or a cheese plate. I think it's quite versatile. And so I would say, go out and experiment and see what you think tastes best on your palate.
I love the idea of trusting your own palate. I just feel like it just opens up and doesn't put us in this category of we have to pair with a certain type of thing. And now it almost feels like you can open it up and try with anything and see what really works for you. I'm curious though, do you recall when was the first time you had a Pinot Noir?
The first time I had a Pinot Noir, it was in California, and I'm pretty sure it would have been in Sonoma. But I can't quite recall. It was probably actually not at a winery. It was probably at home with friends. In our younger days, we would have a lot of friends over, and I would cook, or they would cook, or we would do a little potluck, and people would bring wine, and we'd have wine. And I think that is probably where I tasted Pinot Noir for the first time. And I knew I just kept going back to it. And
Yeah, and you were clearly trusting your palate.
yes, and it took me years to do that. Even when I got into this wine business, I didn't quite trust that in the beginning, but very soon I was like, listen, you got to trust your palate. Like you clearly, when I would meet with my winemaker and I would, give my like feedback or try to, gather some information. That's when I learned like, oh, I actually have a palate that is able to seek out the different things that I would like to see in an elegant or make a comment on this is what I'm not liking here. And I think that's been one of the, very important strengths to have is I didn't have a formal background in the wine making or, wine industry, but I think I had a palate or I have a palate that I trust that I make my business decisions based upon. And, that all started for me in my childhood, where what I was exposed to, the kinds of foods and flavors I was exposed to. I think I get it from my mom. She has quite the discerning palate, if you will.
And I absolutely want to come back to that because I know you've talked about this, that from a very young age, you were raised in an environment where socialization and, wine and food from different cultures was part of how all of you sort of mingled with other people and family and friends. And it came from both your parents. And I remember reading that somewhere. I do want to come back to that, but I want to segue into, the idea that you spoke about that really, I guess inspired you about Mary Edwards and the story behind her being the first woman winemaker out of UC Davis, because you're like the first South Asian woman winemaker in the US now. Can we say that?
I'm the first Indian immigrant woman to own and run a winery.
So Indian immigrant woman. So did you ever see this as your life 10 years ago? If somebody asked you 10 years ago.
I did not. And I did not, but now I know why and how. So,
okay, tell me why and how.
In the first few years, I was like, I have to pinch myself. Like, am I actually doing this? Who would have thought? I tell my husband all the time, who would have thought like 10 years ago that this would be my life? And, but now I think as I have gotten into this, I've worked so incredibly hard, just like everyone else. And I have tried to stick to my vision of, and a certain standard for my wines. And all of that, again, I feel like comes from just who I am as a person, what are the experiences I like, what is kind of the standard of what I consider quality, standard of what I consider hospitality, all of that. And I feel like, again, going from like what I saw when I was a kid to now doing it in this way, I feel like it was now I have the confidence to say that it was meant to be. This was a thing, many experiences in years in the making that has come to fruition for me, that I'm working really hard on building. My journey has just started, but the fact that I got this opportunity in life to do this in itself is like a huge gift. That was many years, I think, in the making.
Yeah. It almost feels like a natural progression of who you are as a person and what you value in your life in terms of lived experiences. It was just almost like subconscious, natural progression of you finding yourself a owner of a winery.
Truly, I absolutely believe that now. Um, and I just feel like there was a lot of self-doubt in the beginning, a lot of, well, I'm really cut out for this, I'm getting into this. Do I know what I'm doing? But now I have this kind of inner peace or self-confidence around, this is my calling in life. And this is what and I'm dedicated my life to it. And I live that every day. And whether whether it's a hard day, whether it's an exciting day, whether it's a lot of scary, risky times, that's my life now, and I live that every day. So it's a lot.
And it's very inspiring. And I do want to acknowledge that it's a lot, but I want to circle back, and I'll be circling back a lot because we're talking about so many topics. And I do want to talk about this transition from self-doubt to self-confidence. What are some of the things that you did to kind of overcome those self-doubts?
I think I had the incredible support of my husband, who I, credit for sort of pushing me in that direction. I feel like my creativity, all of that stuff in childhood that led me to this moment obviously came from my parents. But I really credit my husband for being like, you are going to do this. I know you. I've seen your passion, your talent. You can do this. And there was a lot of like, gosh, this is a pretty big thing. How am I going to do it? And having sort of trust in each other and knowing that my life partner has my, full confidence in me and has his hand on my back always. I think that for sure gave me a lot of confidence and boost to go ahead and do it. And then it became a lot of learning and pivoting and turning, and but also trusting in my gut instincts on many things, on the vision, on how I wanted to do things a little bit differently, how I wanted to set myself apart a little bit. And then I launched the business during the pandemic, which was, some people nowadays say, oh my gosh, that was such a great to be launching a wine brand. And I'm like, really? You think it was the time? It was a difficult thing to do. I'm starting a brand from scratch, no tasting room, no way for people to taste my wines. None of that. I mean, even just going outdoors was like, you're going to die. So, but, I made those decisions, because we were in, classified under agriculture. I could do my bottlings and things like that. And yeah, so it was hard, and it was a challenging year, but going through that and then, bringing the wines out, selling out. Of course, we, started with a small quantity, but, to sell out of that during the pandemic right away was, a pretty big deal for me, at least. But then to lose your grapes that you were, from your vineyard, to smoke taint, that was a tough one. To not have your next vintage, and I think that experience left a pretty lasting impression on me. It was one of those, like, I think everybody during the pandemic just had these things where nobody was just getting a break. There was stuff just going, not according to plan, one after the other. And I think after that, I was like, a lot of this is not in my control at all. And even before that, like the fires of 2019, that was a scary time. But the 2021, I think just there was a mental shift, that truly understanding that this is beyond your control. Many things were, there was glass shortages. We were paying, I don't know how much more for glass and quartz and things like that. So to deal with all of that right at the get-go, which everyone was dealing with, it wasn't just me. But I think it was a very, it was quite a learning curve. But it also gave me the strength that, okay, if I've come out of this and I've been able to take it to the next level, that means that I have something here. Um, and every day that confidence builds. Every time I'm in front of people presenting my wines, and I get, I will say I get pretty good feedback most of the time, pretty good hit rate, if you will call it. And that gives me a lot of encouragement and confidence. And my background is marketing, and there's nothing more better and more gold than customer feedback. And to actually hear that directly from them just gives me a lot of encouragement and confidence that I'm on the right track with what I'm trying to do here. And I think it just strengthens my resolve and strengthens my hedge on my own instincts. Like, hey, my gut instinct was right, and people are seeing what I'm seeing. So I think year over year that thankfully has been, the confidence keeps growing. So, and then it helps you take, the next big risk that's coming your way. And I know we've talked about kind of fear and things in the past. And I was just thinking the other day to myself that I no longer have the option of fear. Fear is no longer an option. I just have to do it. I have to just do what is required ahead of me. I don't even have the bandwidth to fear, which is a pretty interesting thing for me to say, because although I may come across as, many people are like, oh, but you sound so confident and it does not sound like you, but that's not always the reality. I've had many fears throughout my life, and thankfully I've conquered some of those fears, not all of them. But now I just had like this thought the other day. I was doing something in the winery. It was dark. I was by myself. We're out in the kind of rural area with like fox and bobcats and everything. And there I was. And I was like, like a few years ago, you would have not stepped out of the car. And then I was like, but you know what? You don't have the option of having fear.
I'm so curious. I mean, I have 10 questions for you, but I'm going to start with this one. I don't have the option of fear. It's like another mental shift. But what does that like really mean? I can't even like not having an option of fear. How do we get there?
I think it's just an internal shift that happens when you see yourself having so much on your plate that you are constantly, and your dedication is there to do it every time in the right way. So you don't even have time to process your fears. And
or almost, Raghni, I feel like there's your fear, which is valid and it has its place, but you don't give in to it.
Yes, and I always perceived myself as a person who gave into her fears, and for many years in my life, I did, and now I'm seeing that shift of fear is not an option. So maybe, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting,
because I mean, as you know, I mean, there's always in doing many things, having that healthy dose of fear is just pretty common and normal, right? We're talking where it goes beyond that and it debilitates you from doing the thing that you want to do, right? So what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying, I'm acknowledging I have that, I'm not giving into it because I'm so passionate and dedicated to my legacy, I'm going to push through and do what needs to be done.
Yes, I think that's right, that I don't have, fear is no longer holding me back from doing what I need to do. And that is, a pretty liberating thought, mindset.
And it seems to me like when we even talk about it, or when we talk to other people about it, or our viewers who are listening, it just doesn't feel like oh, it just happened overnight. It's like a process that you went through that was even though you consistently had the foundation of your partner and your husband supporting you and having his hands on your back, you still went through the process of, during the pandemic, and then the fires, and then the fear of losing the grapes, or, the smoke, everything that came with it. You just had to still go through that process to come out and have this sort of idea that, wow, I went through all of that, and now I feel like I can go through anything.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. And I know that the journey has just begun. I'm sure there's plenty of challenges ahead. Entrepreneurship it's part and parcel of challenges, and so I have no doubt that challenges will be there. But I think I have realized in the last few years that things will not go as planned always, but there's always a creative solution right around the corner. So I've been in situations where, like, I'm presenting at a big wine event, and we've shipped our wines there so that they can arrive on time, and the people haven't bought the wines, and the event has started, and I don't have my wines there. Like, that's a pretty nerve-wracking thing when you have thousands of people, and this is your first time that you're, putting your best foot forward there.
Yeah.
But then what do you do? And so,
what did you do?
I had to run and go to my nearest retail place and pick up wines from there and bring them to the event. And but that's just, what, and it worked. I had the wines, and then they found the wines. And so, yeah.
It's almost like everything that you went through from after buying the winery, it kind of prepared you to handle and deal with the most challenging situations. And like you yourself said, instead of like saying, oh my God, this is not working, or the wines are not here, what am I going to do? You always have that thought, but then you switch right away to, okay, this is a problem. I need to find a solution right now in the moment.
Yeah.
And I need to think creatively so I can get through this, and then I can,
process.
then
Yeah.
I can do something.
I am very solution focused, because what other option do you have? I think in life and in business, if you want to move forward, you have to have a positive next step. That's the only way you're going to move forward. So
yeah.
So that's just what you do: find a creative solution and do the best you can. And so
I'm slightly smiling because I just realized you actually went and bought your own wine.
Yes.
I was like, what? Wait, what? Did you get a discount?
We worked it out with them, but literally, me running in there saying, I'm sorry, like, I have my wines here. And thankfully it was a vendor that had all of our wines, and I was able to pick up a few bottles of everything. But
amazing.
Also was like, it was also so nice to know that, oh, gosh, like, even though they're a client, I feel like I'm part of that community, and, like, I could actually depend on them to kind of make that happen. So, yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of challenges that are not just like, I'm not special. Every single person in their life challenges, and whether you're whether you work for a company or you own your own business, challenges are always going to be there. And so, part and parcel of life.
True, agreed. But I think what you're speaking to is, in order to succeed, in order to do the thing that brings you the most joy, then you are saying that you will push through those challenges, however difficult they are, and figure out a way to do the best you can in the moment.
Absolutely.
And not give up.
Yeah. Because giving up is going to maybe feel good in the moment, but in the long run, and also the other thing for me personally, where I can't afford to give up, is I have a commitment I have a responsibility. When I started this business, I feel like I owe a responsibility to my customers. And, that's how it started for me. Like, again, it's my marketing mindset. It's all about the customer. And then when I got into it, and then I actually started meeting people, and for, having them tell me, wow, thank you for representing and, us in this wonderful way. We love your wines. Or people who didn't drink wine and were having the wine and were like, this is, I'm not a fan of Pinot, but I'm loving your wine. Or I'm usually a beer drinker, but I'm loving your wine, tastings that I do. So I take that really seriously. And I feel like if I give up, I am letting my customers down.
Yeah. And to what you said earlier, that actually boosted, that gave you the self-confidence, that gave you the motivation and inspiration to continue. Was there a time when you almost gave up?
Yeah, during 2020, when I, when the whole fire thing was happening. I think it was a disturbing time for everyone. Did I almost give up? In the sense, I was contemplating, hey, this is too heavy. This is some serious stuff. And it was
if you don't mind, can you describe the circumstance a little bit more? So there was fire, and
I think it was also just the day. Just remember this day where San Francisco had these eerie orange skies, and I was going to my packaging facility to to set up the type of wax I wanted on the bottle and how exactly I wanted it to be done, and like getting a call, like making the decision, like, okay, they couldn't be, and it wasn't like confirmed, like it was possible smoke taint. So, again, for the sake of quality, that decision was made. But I just remember like calling my dad, and also obviously speaking with my husband, and being like, what is this? Like, why is this happening to me? Like, work this hard, and and I'm really grateful for my dad and brother, and my dad and husband's support, and their advice to me. I feel like all throughout life has always been same, and I feel like that was one of the reasons why I married my husband, because every time, like, if I would ask him some advice, and then I'd ask my dad advice, without them knowing, their advice to me would be the same, and I was like, what is going on here? So, and all these years later, 16 years later, I'm in this position, and again, I find myself at a point where they both are giving me the same advice. And it was, and my dad's an entrepreneur, like he has his own business, and so he's seen these challenges.
What advice did he specifically give you? Like, what was your conversation? What did he say to you that kind of helped you?
He said, this is part and parcel of running a business. You're always going to have challenges. If this goes away, you're going to have another challenge ahead of you. That's how it's going to be. So you just have to make a decision and then move along. And your next challenge will come up, and then again, you'll have to make the same decision, but you got to keep going ahead. And so that was obviously very, very, very encouraging, and sort of, trusting, having people in your life that you trust have your, full 100% interest in you succeeding, and being able to take advice from them. I think is very important, because sometimes that advice may even not be what you want to hear, but knowing that it's advice coming from the right people is important. And so I'm really grateful that I have family that is very, very wants to see me succeed, truly wants to see me succeed, and I'm able to take their advice sometimes, even when it's not something I want to hear.
Right. So both supportive and realistic, and because he himself is an entrepreneur, he was able to tell you through his experience that, listen, kid, challenges are going to come every single time. This is not going to be the one and only challenge you'll ever face. So you just have to face it, make a decision, move forward, and deal with it as and when they come along if you want to succeed in this.
Yes. And and now it's now I actually I live that. I know that every time there's a challenge, because as a business you're growing. With growth comes growth pains, and I no longer look at them as this is too, like, again, here we go again, like this is too difficult. I now look at it as, okay, this is where we're at, and how do we this is the next challenge. How do we solve for it? Let's make it can happen.
Yeah, it's the radical acceptance of saying challenges will come, both in personal and professional life, and especially in business. And if you want to exceed, then this is part and parcel of what you need to do, or if anyone needs to do, to go through.
Yeah.
And just that level of acceptance almost feels like the first step of saying, okay, I accept it, now I can deal with it.
Yeah. And also knowing that you're going to have to take risks all throughout. Having your own business is a lot of risk, and we're making decisions that some of it is based on what you think might happen, and things don't always happen the way you think they're going to happen. So there's always risk and change, and and then ultimately, like, how do you solve for those two things happening at the same time? Yeah.
So calculated risk is part and parcel of having your own business.
Absolutely.
And then honing in on your instincts, relying on your confidence, and saying, listen, I'm looking at all of these things in front of me, and this is the best decision that I can make. And then I'm going to make that decision.
Yes. Execution is key, just doing it like that. We can have all the plans in place. We can have all the, data in front of us. We can do all of that, but actually doing it is the only thing that's going to keep you going forward. And I think the reason why, I've been able to see the brand grow so much in just 3 years is the execution and the commitment to actually doing what I intended to do, which is also a big sort of personal thing. Like I've always, it's been emulated for me, and it's kind of just how I live, is if you say you're going to do something, you better do it. And
so following through. Yeah.
And it's a sense of commitment. Like, this is what I have planned to do. This is why I need to do it, and then actually doing it, and knowing that if you do it, the probability of where you're trying to go, the probability of your goal being achieved is quite a good probability. So even if you don't get 100% of probability all the time, if you keep on executing on what you need to do, you'll at least get 75%, 80%. And that I feel like is very important. Doing this, we can talk all the talk, and but you have to walk the walk. Then you have to get down and dirty your hands and do things that you don't. Other people may not consider that you are actually doing, but it's something that you have to do. So not being afraid of doing that, and being out of your comfort zone, and lugging those cases of wine when it's when that's the only option you have. So yeah.
So taking risks, relying on your instinct, making a decision, following through, and getting down to just doing it, right? I mean, you're saying these are all the things that have really helped you scale and grow your business in the last few years, in spite of the challenges that you faced. And that takes a lot of grit and determination.
Yeah, a lot of, that's why, if you go on my website and you read the story from day one, it was, passion, hard work, perseverance, and grit. That is not something that was put out there for marketing purposes. That is the truth that I live.
And that was your experience. That continues to be your experience.
And it was there for a reason, as a part of my story. and is very much the reason why I'm here. It's because of those things. So that it really is about that.
Yeah. And, for someone that there's no one that really looks like you in the winemaking business. So how do you do this with from outside help? Do you have a mentor? Do you have people who support you outside of your sphere? How do you do this?
So at the get-go, first of all, I don't have anybody from within the industry that I can, call up and be like, here, I'm doing this. And, but, there are small steps here and there. But yeah, there aren't too many people who are of Indian descent. There's some. There definitely some, but they may not be doing exactly what I'm trying to do. Everybody has their own journey and path, I believe. But it's a lot of self-reliance, and it's a lot of going by your own gut instincts, and sometimes being told in the beginning, like, no, if you're going to do it this way, it's not really going to work, but then still doing it the way I wanted to do it, and trusting my gut on it, and be like, no, I am going to start small. I'm not going to start at 1,000 cases. I'm going to start at these many cases, and I'm going to see how it goes. I'm going to see what the feedback on quality is. I'm going to see year over year. My focus is on quality, not quantity. And that's my focus, even though in the rest of ultimately it is going to be about scale, but I'm not here for scale right away. I'd rather have a quality, really, really high quality product that I can then scale versus starting with scale and then focusing on quality. I knew I did not want to do that. And in terms of just the packaging, the how I set out to do things, I think I did it based on what I felt I needed to do. And also from like a consumer perspective of how I perceived the consumer to make decisions. So I did it based on that, and I think it worked. And obviously, so much.
But wait a minute, you're actually saying that you went against the advice of maybe somebody who had more experience in this when they said, "Hey, you need to do this on scale," and you said, "No, wait a minute, my gut is telling me that that's not how I want to run this business."
Yeah. I mean, it's a known fact. It's a common fact within the industry. Like anytime you meet someone in the industry and they want to suss out who you are or what you do, the first question is, how many cases do you make? And I wish their first question would be, what's the quality of your wines? I feel like that is the conversation I want to have. I want to talk about the quality of my wines. I don't want to talk about because what does that tell you? Cases, I mean, yeah, it tells you how big of a winery you are, but I'm here not for being big. I mean, ultimately, yes, I have a very, strong vision of where I see my brand going in like the next 20 years. But right now, and that vision is to take a really high quality product and take it worldwide. And a crazy dream right now, but that's my dream. But right now, my focus is on quality and getting it to as many people as I can within the United States.
So that brings me to this other thing, this quote that I read. You said, quote, "As someone who does not fit the mold of a traditional vintner, I have to prove a lot more to my potential buyers. I'm held to a much higher standard of vetting than my counterparts." Like, tell me more.
I think so. Some of it may be my own perception of things, but it's not very often that you see. First of all, sometimes people don't know I'm the business owner. Like they're like, so that's that. There's nothing I can do about that. Then, like, just the like, oh, so you are the owner. And then I get all sorts of like, how did that happen? Like, you wouldn't ask that question of somebody else in this industry. So those questions reveal so much, I think, in terms of where people are at. Because honestly, when I when I got into this, I did not, I don't know, the kind of environment I grew up in, even back home in India, you were just who you were. You weren't like a boy or girl or, this or that. And when I came to the United States, I've lived in Australia as well. So I was a little taken back about how people are pigeonholed into different things. Like, oh, if you're this, you must be that. If you're this, you must be that. And I couldn't quite wrap my head around that. So I obviously saw it, first hand. But it's not something that holds me back. I feel like that's their journey. Like if people are not viewing me the way that I want to be viewed, that's not something I have control over. But I do voice, and I can try to shed some light to how things could be different. But I cannot control how they perceive me, because their perception is based off of their life experiences. So that does, I feel like, hold me back sometimes. I get questions on like, what is your qualification? Which is fine. Okay. That's all good. But I'm, my qualification is I own a business. I've invested heavily in this business, and that's my qualification, and period.
And you're passionate and motivated and wanting to bring a really good quality wine product, and you're like, yeah, and that's what I do. So you're basically just at the point where like, hey, I hear what you're saying, but I'm here to change the narrative, and I'm not going to put the onus on you to change the narrative. I'm going to share my story, and I'm going to speak about my experiences, and I can only hope that you'll be open-minded to listen.
Yeah, and I think things are changing. The new generation that's out there, they want to see a bit of a change in the scenery, and they're very much about different cultures and exploring different cuisines, and it's a very diverse conversation out there, and everybody has a space. I mean, this is America. Everybody belongs here, and so it's been so encouraging and so amazing to have then, feedback from like articles from Michelin, Forbes, Wine Enthusiast, and have my wines at like 2, 3, and 1 Michelin star restaurants. That's proof in the pudding, and so I gotta focus on that, and I focus on like, this is the types of placements I want to have, and staying true to that. And of course, it means for everybody. But if such acclaimed places are bringing my wines on, then I don't need to say much.
Yeah, I hear you. And you've mentioned this, that you are more about quality of wine. How would you describe a quality wine?
In my opinion, quality wine, especially, Pinot Noir, feel like it's a true reflection of the terroir it comes from. And so my focus is on single vineyard, single varietal wines, where the grapes come from one single vineyard, and they're not being blended with various like 3, 4 other vineyards. So my production is smaller, but because the grapes are all coming from then one vineyard, the quality is, and they're all, very premium vineyards. And I think that just comes through in the wine. So that is one step, right? That is the first step of quality. Like, you're starting with really exceptional ingredients, and then how is the wine being made? We're very low intervention. We don't, our wines are unfined, unfiltered. We don't, add like minimal sulfur is added. Other than that, everything is very like low intervention, and yet we're able to make a really exceptional wine All our barrels come from Burgundy. We use French Burgundy barrels. I've personally been there, met my Cooper, seen the process. And it's a relationship that I take like very seriously, and I continue to kind of cultivate that relationship. Then comes bottling the wine, like the screen printing, the hand dipped wax. These are all of our wines are hand dipped in wax a certain way that goes, across our bottles, and then ultimately how it's branded and packaged. So every step of the way, quality is the number one criteria. There's no like, oh, well, we could save like $2 here, or, which will ultimately save this much money. You have to obviously do that. You have to make business decisions, but then you also have to know what is the brand image that you're trying to cultivate. So you could have that, you could have things done a different way, but ultimately then the brand image you're going for may not be what. So I want to be consistent in the brand image throughout. So every step of the way, even the placements of the wines, I feel like are in just such quality spaces. When people come and stay at our vineyard, it's a very quality experience. So for me, it's a easy criteria. One criteria, it's quality, and like the rest, everything falls into place when you have a vision and a goal of why you're making the decision. Then it all flows through from that.
Yeah. So every step of the way, you're like, this is the one value that I am not going to skimp on. I am going to, and my value is that it has to be quality product. So it's low intervention, whether it's a one kind of grape, whether it's like branding or designing, whether it's a handbags, you're like, it is going to be just based on that one value.
Yes.
And how did you come to this one value as a new winemaker? Like it's not like you've been in the wine industry or, went with were working there for 10, 15 years. And how did you come to this one value with a small winery and founding a new business?
That's a good question. I think for me, this entire, venture is really an extension of who I am. I, mentioned commitment, dedication, all of those things. And that's who I am. That's what I value in life. And I greatly value quality experiences in life. Quality experiences has a much larger of a weight than a quantity type experience. And everything that I do, everything that I bring into my life, my intention is always to have maybe less of something, but more of the quality of it. And so I didn't see any other way to do this. Also, the vineyard that I bought, to do justice to that, to do justice to that property and the incredible terroir, it had to be truly about quality.
Yeah, it aligned with, your own temperament and personality and what you value. And it almost feels like some of these things were inculcated from a very young age with how you saw your parents live their life.
Absolutely. So like whether it was having a large kitchen garden and things being grown there, like it was just a part of our life. It was not something special. It was just the way it was. Radishes were coming. It was a thing, like radishes would come fresh from the kitchen garden, and we would they would be plucked in the morning, and we'd be having it for lunch, or all sorts of other vegetables that my mother grew would make it directly from the kitchen garden to the dinner table. And that was it was the norm. And so when you have, when that's just the way it was, what was normal, and then you can then see sometimes the difference in like the quality of produce, You're like, well, why is this not tasting the way?
This business, I mean, it just seems very exciting and adventurous, almost like fairy tale. But I really want to get into like the nitty gritty of day to day. How do you keep track of your daily actions, like towards your bigger dream? Like it just feels like there's so many moving parts.
Yeah, I struggled with that. I mean, that was, you know, like I said, like I'm a person of my word. And I came to a point where I was missing on my word because something fell through on the calendar or something, like it was just too much the intention was there, but the ability to keep up with it was not there. And so I started reading this book. It's called Getting Things Done. And I'm forgetting who it's by.
I think, yeah. I just, somebody else recommended that book to me the other day,
Well,
Getting
really?
Things Done.
It's Getting Things Done by David Allen. And I haven't read the whole book, but when I was driving to LA last time, I was driving by myself, and those 5 hours, and it was really eye-opening, the first few chapters. And it really resonated with me, is that how our brain goes into a loop, like when things are not closed off, a task is not closed off, your brain will remind you to do that task at a time when you absolutely cannot do the task. And it drives you crazy because your mind is like full of all these open loops. And it was really nice to get that acknowledgement that, hey, I'm not crazy. This is like what my brain is doing right now. And so he really, I think, has quite a, way of putting things in different buckets. And I haven't read the whole book yet, but what's been really helpful, I just have just a standing document of things that need to be done. And they could be, he calls it the catch bucket. So everything gets caught there. And you then from that, you assign it to different things. Like you put something on your calendar. And this is just the first few chapters. He has a much more thorough method of organizing yourself. But just this has made it very helpful for me because I'm not missing things up. Even if it's a small thing, it could be anything. It could be something in your personal life. Like, I have 2 kids. I have a husband. We have family. So there's multiple things on our family's calendar that needs to be tracked as well. So it could be all of that. And then I'm just, crossing that out, or like then creating the next task. Okay, this is what needs to be done. And how do I execute on getting this done has been helpful. Getting better at the calendar organization is something that has helped.
I love this catch bucket. You haven't even finished the book, but with just a few chapters, it feels like you already have like a tool that really made sense for you. And then and you're like, you know what? I'm just putting it into practice like right away.
Right away, yeah. Because again, I don't have the luxury of not trying it. I'm just like, I'm going
to try whatever works.
Whatever is in front of me, I'm going to do it. If I feel like there's an inkling of, first, it's hard for me, honestly. I think something I really need to work on is hard for me to take advice from people sometimes. But
why is that?
I don't know. I have to really, really trust and respect someone to be able to take advice. And I, again, have sometimes very idealistic standards of what that respect and standard looks like. And, but I've learned over the years that I have to trust that. That's my standard, and I have to trust it. And yeah, it may be very high, or it may be very, I don't know, annoying.
To you or to others?
Mostly.
Well, at least you're self-aware. Like, at least you're self-aware that this doesn't work for me, and you're like working with what feels more natural and right for you.
Yeah. And so when I if something resonates with me deeply is when I can take that. This book resonated with me because I liked the way he was. It was a very, not scientific, but it made sense to my brain. Like, yes, this is exactly what I'm going through. This is why these are all these open loops in my head, and I need to stop these loops. And ever since I've done that, I feel like stress has gone down. Otherwise, I would be dreaming of my task lists at night. Literally, I'm like walking in my dream, and now I'm not doing that.
You're having more nice dreams, hopefully, and not of your task list. But isn't that great when you find something, you read something, and it completely makes sense to you, and then there's a tool and it resonates, and you put it into practice. It just feels so seamless. Two things. One is David Allen used to live in Ojai.
France or something, or Italy.
Yeah. And then, but how did you find this book?
I just found it on Audible.
Oh, you were just skimming through and you said, this makes sense?
I was specifically looking for a book that would help me with being more organized. And
okay.
Started another book, but that was too military for me. I could not, like, it had probably a great insight, but it came like my husband would probably,
it would resonate more with him.
It was like Navy people, and it was, but this, I don't know what it was, but it...
Was there like another book that you tried to read other than this military book, but the tips like really didn't stick?
Well, not really, because I don't have time anymore.
You're like, I want to read, but I don't have the time.
Be part of a book club, a wonderful book club that was so awesome, and some other things, unfortunately, I've had to put on pause because if I'm reading a book, it's about something that's helping me in my business at this point, because there's a lot of growing that I need to do here. But I love reading, and I miss out on actually reading, where I feel like I can really take things. So I'm on the road a lot. I listen to books that I find helpful if I'm like alone. But I feel like my attention span has gotten so bad and he talks about that. He talks about in today's day and age, we have so many things distracting us. So, like, you look at your phone and you get distracted. You could be in the middle of something. God forbid you looked at your phone. You could go off on a different tangent, and then you go down this rabbit hole of different things. And I struggle with that of being a little bit more disciplined about not going down those rabbit holes and then feeling overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I have so much to do.
Does he give any like a tip to kind of manage that, or is this part of the catch bucket list?
Because his thing is get that loop closed in your brain so that you put it somewhere else. So your brain, it's not an open-ended thing in your brain, especially for people, I think, who are very memory-oriented. Like I am the type of person, I have to admit, I would have my calendars like in my brain. Like just like that was, obviously that's not doable anymore for a long time. That was, or my task list would be in my head.
Right.
And I would know exactly when what is what, but obviously that's not tenable anymore. And I had to make a few mistakes to be like, you need to,
this is not working, right? This is,
you need to change it. And then what works for me is reading a book about it and like
putting it to practice. I think that's the key, because most of us and many of us read tons of books and they're like great for the moment. But I think what we're really looking at and what you're speaking to is that this thing like really resonated with me, and I'm putting it into practice right away, and it actually has reduced my stress level, because I think that's the key, right? That's the recipe that we're really talking about. You've given me so many sort of different tools and things that have worked for you, which I really, really appreciate. So one final question to you is, what is your recipe for life now?
My recipe for life, one is honesty and transparency. That's always been the thing, like honesty and living honesty to yourself also, like growing up, it was like, okay, honesty towards it, but honesty towards yourself is equally important, and being transparent with yourself is equally important. So that's always been the thing. Now the recipe to my life is dedication, and being dedicated to my family. There's 4 of us here. All our families back home in India. Dedication to them, dedication to my work, and that's kind of the bandwidth that I have. And giving it my very best, giving my best quality to these two. Again, me, it's like giving my best quality to these two passions and loves that I have in my life, and from that stems obviously a lot of things, but it's a lot of hustle, it's a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, and living that, and giving it your best shot and executing your best shot. That is my recipe for life. And we're here for, we have one life, and you have to live it and give it your max. And I feel like I am doing my best to live it and give it my max. And
live it and give it my max. I love that. Thank you so much for coming here and spending time with me and talking to me. I had such a great I feel like I've gotten so much from us just chatting and like just hearing you speak to your experiences. And thank you so much. And yeah, I have your wine with me.
Awesome. No. Thank you. Always such a pleasure speaking with you. And it's easy to speak with someone when they know a certain depth. And I just feel that with you, that there's a certain depth there, that you understand these things on a much deeper level. And so I had a very lovely conversation with you, and thank you so much for letting me have this conversation and sharing it with others. And hopefully we'll see each other soon.
I hope so. I can't wait to see you in Ojai.
Yes, we'll make that.
Hey, this is Deepa again. I hope you really enjoyed my show today. Thank you so much for listening to our conversation. If you'd love to get in touch with me or my guest, or would like the show notes, resources, or links, please reach out to me on my website. I would also love your feedback. Until next time.